Elysium is a game that was released recently, but I knew absolutely nothing about until I saw it played here at Origins Game Fair 2015, which is also where I am at the present time and where I'm filming. And just looking at the game, it looked very attractive. It really caught my eye. Call me shallow, but I simply stopped by the table where people were playing it because it looked so gorgeous, because of the colors that were really attractive in the art. And I started looking at the gameplay, and that seemed interesting, so I sat down, I played the game, and I really enjoyed it. Spoiler, so yes, this is a game that I enjoyed, so my review is going to be positive. In Elysium, you are trying to become immortal. Yes, that's the small ambition of the game. It is set in an ancient mythological Greece, where all of the elements of Greek mythology happen to be real. In this game, you're trying to interact with the gods, to manipulate them in a sense, to have them help you to perform certain tasks. So you quote-unquote recruit the help of the gods, and you exploit the actions that they allow you to perform, the powers that they can provide to you. But there's a time when you are shifting your resources from resources that you can use to resources that you cannot use anymore, but that you will score at the end of the game. You have to transfer some of your resources. That is when the present becomes past. The fluid motion of history becomes legend, becomes crystallized in immortal retelling of the story. It's a pretty complicated way of saying there is a time where you can use your cards, and then you turn the card into a legend. You cannot use it for its effect anymore, but you can score it at the end of the game. At the end of the game, at the core, this is what the game is about. Of course, it's about using actions and scoring cards. Nevertheless, the game is still quite thematic, both because of the art, which, as I said, is so attractive and so conspicuous. It's really, wow, it's really there, it's part of the game, but also because of the way in which the game effects have been tied to the theme. So, while ultimately it's a game of collecting cards and forming sets and scoring those sets at the end of the game, and while the game is definitely not as thematic and immersive like an historical war game or an RPG, still the game is thematic enough. You do get the sense that the theme is a part of the game. Anyhow, let me tell you how the game works. I usually don't care much about box inserts, and a large number of inserts in my games are thrown out pretty soon after I open the box. But for this game, the box inserts and the presentation are so nice that I really wanted to show them to you. There are these components here that represent the bases and the top of a temple, and here the slots for the cards look like the columns of a temple. Look how nice the entire thing looks, on top of helping to keep things well organized. So I really like the way this box insert looks. Yes, in this game there will be a part of the game that will look like a temple, and we will use these two components here to form that area. Then you will also place these cards here. They are initiative cards. Players will select them during a turn, and that will indicate the order in which the players will act at the end of the present turn and at the beginning of the following one. You have these tokens here, which are used for scoring initiative tokens to represent the order that will be created by the selection of those cards. And super important, family cards. Cards representing different types of gods that will be interacting with the players during the game. Each family comes with a deck of cards and two tokens that you use to form a mini pile with the 5 on top and the 2 at the bottom. These tokens are given to the first and second player to complete a set of cards belonging to a certain family. In each game you will choose 5 families. You will take the corresponding decks, you will take the corresponding mini stacks, and then you will put all of the cards together to form a larger deck. You mix them together. And so since you have 9 families to choose from, that means that there will be a large number of combinations of gods that will become part of each game. I'm not going to set up the game entirely. I'm not even going to shuffle together all the cards so I don't have to separate them later. Now, the cards. Cards have symbols printed in the top right corner indicating the type of resource that you need to have available to acquire that card. Here you have a value that you use for creating settings and for scoring, and that is represented both by the number and the symbol of the family. And here various game effects that the card can allow you to use, pretty much benefits that you can use at various times, sometimes at the end of the game, sometimes immediately after you acquire the card. Different symbols will tell you when you can use different types of abilities. This kind of ability can be used once per game. You put a token there to remind you that you still have the ability available. Once you use the ability, you discard the token. So you shuffle all these cards together, and then you will draw cards that you will place in an area under this temple here. This is the area that players will use to draw their cards. So players each turn will look at the cards that are available in the play area that you use to acquire cards, and they will be collecting those cards. They will be drafting cards. Each turn actually is divided in 2 phases. First, a phase when you draft cards, and then a phase when you use those cards to build your legend. Said in less epic terms, that is the phase when you will use the cards to move them from the area of the game where you can use the cards for their effects to another area where you can score them at the end of the game. At the end of the game you can only score cards that are in your scoring area, which means there is a timing challenge here. You have to figure out the right time to transfer your cards from the area where you can use them to the area where you need them to score. Each player also has a play raid like this, and you place it by your area. You don't see it entirely right now, but that's not all that important. What's important is simply that you can see that there is an area on top and an area above. So you will have this an area on top and an area below. You will have one of these in front of you. During the game you will purchase cards and you will place them here on top of your personal organizer, let's call it that way, and then at the end of the turn you'll get a chance to score the card and you transfer it underneath. This is the area where the cards that you score will be, but once they're here you cannot use the effects anymore. So purchase, put them there, later transfer them here. This is the basic idea. Each player has a set of 4 colored columns. They're really neat. You can put them in the central area of your organizer or on the left, it doesn't matter. What matters is that as you acquire cards, you will spend these tokens and you will put them on the right area. So as long as you have ways of telling which are the ones that you haven't used yet and which are the ones that you have used already, the details are immaterial. So at the beginning of a turn, there is the phase where players are drafting cards. You have 4 columns, which means you will be able to draft 4 cards and put them in your play area. Of these cards, 3 will come from this area and 1 will be an initiative card. You can take them in any order. Initiative card and then 3 here, 2, 1 and 1. It doesn't matter. First player drafts a card from here, from there. Second player drafts another, and you go around like this until all players have 4 cards. As I said earlier, there are symbols here that represent the types of columns that you need to have available to be able to acquire that card. This is an interesting thing. Each card costs 1 column, and the cards and the columns that you need available to acquire a card do not necessarily need to be the one that you're going to spend. What? Well, it simply means that if you want this card, you need to still have the blue column available once you acquire it, but the blue column does not have to be the one that you spend. I can take this card, I show that my blue column is still available, and I spend the yellow one instead. Next turn, the game goes around and I decide that I want to acquire this card. My blue column is still available and I decided I want to spend that one. So this allows you pretty much to get several cards with the same color if you so wish. In this case, for example, this card, it will not cost me a red column and a yellow column. It will still cost me one column, which can be of any color, but I need, in order to acquire this card, to still have red and yellow in my available area, which in this case I do not. In this case I need the blue and any other one, which I do, then I would be able to acquire this card, and suppose I decide this time, yes, to spend my blue. So on and so forth. Now I would be left with only the red one, which I can spend to use this. However, because of the limited amount of resources that you have to acquire your cards, it may very well be that at some point you will not be able to acquire any of the cards. Maybe you won't be able to acquire a card from here, or you won't be able to acquire an initiative card. For example, this is the situation and this card has already been acquired. I only have this card to acquire one of the initiative cards. I do not have any of the necessary columns, blue, green or yellow. Then I'm stuck getting one of the ones that are left, but once I take it, I flip it, and I get a reduced, less effective version of that card. As you can see, there are more symbols here, which means I can do more things with this card. But since I was not able to acquire it through the proper resources, then I get the worst version. The same applies here. If I have to take a card from here and I do not have any resources that will allow me to take any of the cards, then I take one of the cards and I flip it to the back and I use it as a generic card. This is called a citizen in this case. So you may get actual initiative cards, actual cards from here, or the reduced, the worse version. But at the end of each turn, again, you will have 3 cards that come from here and 1 card that comes from there. Not exactly at the end of each turn, at the end of the initial phase. Then you have the phase when players will start transferring cards from here to form their legends, which really means to form the sets that will allow them to score. You go in that phase, you go in the order indicated by these cards. So the player with this card will start transferring cards first, then this player, so on and so forth. You receive the resources that you see here at the bottom. You receive some coins that are important later in the game. You will receive, well, let's do this. These are glory points, that is victory points, and this is the number of cards that you can transfer from here to here. So there is a very limited number of cards that you can place in your scoring area each turn. If you go earlier in that phase, you only get 1, but you go earlier, so there is that advantage. It also means you go earlier next turn. If you go last, you will be able to transfer 3 cards. You get 3 coins, but for example, you will not get victory points. So there are pluses and minuses, but to me here, really the key information is how many cards you can transfer. And you will transfer cards, and when you transfer cards, you can put them separate from one another, or you can start forming sets. Once you form sets, they are locked. You cannot later transfer them to other sets or make them separate from one another. It's really rigid. The main sets will be of cards of different colors, but with the same number of, or cards of the same color with sequential numbers. And in this case you can have sets of 2, but even better if you have a set of 3. If you are the first player to have a set of 3 sequential cards in a color, then you get the 5 token. If you're the second player, you get the 2 token. This is basically the key idea of the game. Draft cards, score them, repeat for 5 turns, and at the end you will score cards, and the scoring will work based on the rules that are outlined in this nice player aid. Each player will receive 1 At the end of the game, you will score whatever of these tokens you have. There is also a token for the player with the largest family made of only ones, the larger families of 3 value cards, and the largest family of 2 value cards. Think of these as the longest road in Settlers of Catan. It's for the player that has the largest set, but other players can take it away from you. Then you will score these tokens for the players that acquired families before the players did. Then sets of 2 sequential cards of the same color are worth 3 points. Sets of 3 sequential cards are worth 6 points. Sets of cards with the same value and different colors are worth a number of points based on how many cards you have in that set. For example, here I have a set of 3 cards with the same value, different colors, that will allow me to score 4 points. This you only use for if you are playing with the Heiress family. Here there are some cards with the symbol here, which simply means you will score them at the end of the game. It is at the end of the game that their effect will become important. Here, for example, do you have one such card? This card is worth a victory point for each different family in this legend, which means if I take if I place that card, oh, this would be a nice combo. If I have this card in a family of 1, then this card is worth 1 for each different family. In this set, there are multiple families, so it's worth 1 point for each. Interesting is that the other cards have the same effect, so in this way, these cards will build upon each other. Each will give you points for the different families in that set. So these are good if you place them in sets of cards with different colors, but with the same numerical value. Also, the Citizens, which is just a normal card, turn into a generic card when you flip it on the back, acts as a wild card. You can place them in a set to increase the set, but however, at the end of the game, all the citizens that you have in your score area will be worth -2. And very important, once you transfer cards from this area here to your scoring area, the effect become useless. The only effects that you will still refer to are the ones that score at the end of the game. Other effects that give you benefits, extra actions, extra resources are ignored. You proceed like this for 5 turns, and at the end of the 5th turn, the player with the highest amount of points is the winner of the game. I really enjoyed this game. This is one of the best games that I played at Origins game for 2015, and trust me, the last couple of days have been busy with games from dawn to the following dawn, not even dusk, just game and night. So gaming, and this one really is a game that stands out and doesn't just stand out aesthetically as it did originally when you first saw it played. It really stands out mechanically. I think it has a lot of interesting aspects that have been implemented quite well. One thing that this game makes me think of is the game Abyss that I picked up at Gen Con 2014. Not so much for the way in which you acquire resources, acquire cards, because that is completely different, but from this key conundrum that you're presented with, which is to find the right timing of when it comes to switching from using your resources to scoring your resources. To me, that is really key. This is really one of the most interesting challenges that you have in the game. You have these great resources that are giving you a lot of wonderful powers and are going to be absolutely worthless unless you score them. But once you score them, then you cannot use them anymore. So you really have to find the right balance here. You score them too early, then you're gonna be disadvantaged later in the game because other players have more powerful effects that you're using from their cards. You score them too late, then you have all of those great effects that you have used and probably had a lot of fun doing so, but that's not good enough to win the game. That conundrum there is really interesting. Something I didn't mention earlier is that when it comes to transferring your cards, from the active area to the legendary area. Not only do you have a restriction when it comes to the number of actions that you have, that is indicated on your initiative card, but also you have to pay gold. That is what the gold is mainly for. You have to pay gold, so a 1 value card costs 1 gold to transfer, 3 value card 3 gold. So if you have a set of 3 that you're going to transfer, and that is going to be great, but it's a set of 3 value cards, that's 9 gold. It's gonna take a while for you to collect all that wealth. A lot of restrictions. You have a limited number of cards that you can acquire, which is limited by the colors available on the tableau on the board and the colors that are still available in your play area. You're limited by the initiative card when it comes to the number of cards that you can transfer, and you're limited by the amount of gold. So at the end, when you do form a set which scores a lot, that is rewarding because you did have to put a lot of thinking into that. I really like all of these challenges, all of these aspects that you have to keep in mind to be successful, both in terms of the combination of resources that you create and dynamically the timing of transferring cards from one aspect, from one area to the other. I keep insisting on this because to me this is really one of the things that I found most enjoyable and challenging at the same time. Challenging in an enjoyable and fun way, like you have in game designs that are not hard to understand mechanically. You choose when you transfer them, but they're really hard to grasp when it comes to play them optimally. They really present fun challenges. It's a game with a lot of interaction, if indirect in the sense that you usually do not attack the players, but timing is of the essence when it comes to pursuing your objectives and goals, and being really annoying to other players, preventing them from doing what they would want to do. So you need to keep an eye out and see what other players are trying to do. A player is going to score a phenomenal set of cards that will give them a lot of points. Is there a way of taking some resources away from that player, simply of acquiring a card that you think could be useful to that player? But in doing so, if you're simply then limiting your options, if you are then finding yourself with a card that is not so useful, well, I would say you took a bullet for the team. You did something non-optimal for you that damaged somebody else. But of course, if you can find a way of doing both things, that's great. But that may also be that that may also mean that you are now facing a conflict of interest. Precisely because of this, you're trying to remove cards that could be useful for somebody else and to use them. Now you and another player are going for the same cards, and again the timing there is going to be key. Who is going to go first? Who is going to get the resources that are going to be most important? I really like this. There are just so many ways in which you can annoy other people, and they can annoy you simply by taking the cards that you want. It's not just a matter of like, I want to complete a set. It is also a matter of the colors that are available. I see that another player could not possibly use a certain kind of color, but could not possibly acquire certain types of cards. Then I'm gonna force that player not to take any cards, because I'm simply acquiring cards that will leave a combination of colors on the board that will be disadvantageous to other players. So you can definitely lock other players out of opportunity by taking certain cards. Again, it's a matter of being able to do two services with one trip, being able to both affect other players negatively and pursue your own objectives. And just so many ways of pursuing these objectives, from scoring sets earlier by getting those tokens, getting the longest road type of tokens, and then simply creating powerful sets. So you're just buying cards. That is pretty much what it is. You're acquiring cards, but there's just so much strategy that goes into it. Strategy in terms of long-term planning, tactics and interaction in terms of responding to other players, because you have such a limited amount of resources, such a large number of limitations and restrictions, and everybody's going to try to exploit the status, the situation of limited resources to swing things towards their own objectives. I really like this competition for limited resources and just a lot of subtleties. Also, that come, for example, from the way in which the cards are acquired. I really like this, the flexibility that comes from being able to acquire cards without spending the corresponding color. It still forces you to narrow your options gradually as a turn progresses. You start with the ability of buying any card on the board. Of course, as you buy cards and you're spending your columns, then the range of possible acquirable cards narrows, but in a way that does allow you to choose the way in which you want to narrow your options, does allow you a larger number of purchases, or at least I should say not a larger, but a more varied, a more flexible number of options. And another way, of course, of maximizing your strategies to try to keep your options open for as long as possible to see possible cards that you may be interested in and trying to leave a combination of available columns that will allow you to still get something if the other players are getting some of the cards that are interesting to you. Keep your options open, find the right timing to commit to sets and to commit to scores, and in a nutshell, this is what you need to do to win the game, but since everybody else is trying to do so too, then things are going to be pretty challenging. I like this game. I like this game a lot. There's a lot of thinking that goes into it, a lot of game effects, a lot of aspects to it that do not feel fiddly at all. The overall core engine of the game is pretty simple. The amount of possible things that you can do thanks to the game effects is absolutely astounding, and the amount of subtleties that come from trying to read other people's goals and what they're trying to do is definitely something that adds a lot of challenge to the game. So I liked it. I like this game a lot. I like the variety of scoring. I like the challenges. I like the limited resources. And as I said already, I like the way the game looks, which is not that essential to me when I play a game, but it is an added bonus when everything else is in the game is also convincing and exciting too. So, Elysium. Definitely one of the best games that I played at Origins 2015, possibly the best that I played here, and most certainly one of the best non-war game games that I played in 2015. May just be one of the best games that I played in 2015 period, but I don't want to mix things too much because comparing a non-war game with a heavy historical war game is just two different categories, and comparing them it becomes kind of like weird and inaccurate. But definitely an excellent game, a game that gave me a lot of rewarding moments. I'm glad that I purchased the copy. I'm glad I have it in my collection. I can't wait to bring it home and to show it to my friends. I think we will have a lot of time in the future playing Elysium. Great game, really.